And what's interesting about the concept of covenant eyes and people using it, we have found that 96% of people who start using our software with and have an ally in place, 96% never score from day one above to explicit. We hear constantly people say, just knowing that someone else is seeing what would appear on my screen, it gets rid of that online disinhibition effect, right? Where because it's secret, maybe I'll go places that I wouldn't go if you were sitting right next to me. And that's really what Covenant Eye said. It allows someone to walk with you so you're not stuck alone and vulnerable. A lone sheep is a dead sheep.
Welcome to the Betrayal, Recovery, Transformation podcast, where we explore the journey from heartbreak to healing and transformation. Here are your hosts, Chris Rocha and Jen Howie.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Betrayal, Recovery, Transformation podcast, where we talk about all things betrayal, all things recovery, and all things transformation. I'm your host, Chris Rocha, and I'm here with my co-host and restoration warrior, Jen Howie. Hi, friend.
How long is your list of names for me?
Oh, I think I have 25 in reserve right now.
Holy smokes. That'll last us a few podcasts.
It will. A couple.
Earlier, I asked you if you chat GPT these. You said that you do not. So I'm very proud of you for that.
Thank
each
you.
One of these names being an original Chris thought.
Thank you. It's a little the rhyming and the play on words and all that. And I do try to pick a name that fits with the guest and the subject we're going to have on for each podcast. And Restoration Warrior definitely fits with our guest and the topic we're covering today.
Excellent.
And
excellent.
You are that.
Yes, as are you. And as is our guest today. And honestly, as is many of our listeners as well.
Mm-hmm.
We're in this together. So welcome everybody on our show today is Sam Black. He is the director of recovery education of Covenant Eyes for 18 years now, from what I just learned, which is amazing, Sam. And he helps individuals and churches address the challenges of pornography addiction. He has an 18-year background in journalism. Impressive. Sam has edited numerous books on the subject and frequently speaks to parents, men, church leaders about breaking free from pornography through accountability and grace. And I know this is one area that, Chris, we hear over and over again. Women are like, I want my husband to be accountable. Where is the accountability in the church? So Sam is actually going to talk to us about accountability and what that looks like.
That's right. And another good thing is Sam is the author of the book, The Healing Church. Subtitle there is What Churches Get Wrong About Pornography and How to Fix It. So that's good news because you and I have referenced that book when we've spoken to pastors and other people, and our listeners can grab that book and learn more on their own as well. This book offers practical guidance for ministry leaders to create safe spaces and processes for healing, and that is so needed in the church today. Drawing on over 70 interviews with pastors, counselors, and individuals in recovery, Sam provides actionable steps for churches to support those seeking freedom from compulsive behaviors. Sam, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Chris, Jen, I am just really looking forward to this conversation. You guys are so much fun and just take on tough topics, but at the same time can venture through these with kindness and care and even some humor now and again. I love how your intro there, that was just so much fun. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
We are too. We have been for weeks. So thank you, Sam. Take it away, Jen. What's your first question?
Oh, goodness. So many questions that aren't even on this list of questions today, but I'll stick to the list for now and ask you, Sam, please explain to us, to our listeners, how Covenant Eye works. I know that that Covenant Eyes has been a part of mine and Dan's life. Would love to hear from you, though, about its features and how it integrates accountability to help individuals break free from pornography. So explain a little bit to us about Covenant Eyes.
Yeah, thank you. We have been doing this for 25 years. Covenant Eyes introduced the idea of online accountability back in 2000. And what we do today is, of course, much different. It's grown and changed over the years. But what we do is we actually monitor the screen with artificial intelligence, and it knows what pornography is. And we taught a this artificial intelligence by imagine your grandmothers who looked at a million things, video, imagery, etc., that were pornography, and a million things that were not, and fed that to this artificial intelligence algorithm. And that's how it learned. So your grandmother's rules apply here of what so and it's actually monitoring the screen itself. So it doesn't matter even if I put a flash drive in the side of my computer, that's not even online, right? Or if it appears on the screen, it's captured and then it's sent to an ongoing feed that that artificial intelligence also rates if it's inappropriate, not inappropriate, so it flags the content. And so you actually use two different apps with Covenant Eyes today. One is the Covenant Eyes monitoring app, and the second app is a companion app. Now, the Covenant Eyes app is what's monitoring. It's actually and also blocking, filtering as you like. But we have another app that's actually free, and you can just download the Victory app without even downloading the Covenant Eyes app, by the way. And it's free, and it's full of educational content to help people understand how did I get stuck? Why do I seem to stay here? And how can I break free? And there's exercise and other things on there. And of course, our allies use the Victory app also to receive all the reporting that happens through the monitoring. So you use the two apps together as an individual, or if you're just an ally, you might just use the Victory app, one, growing in your understanding of why someone stays stuck, but also to receive the reporting on an ongoing basis, continuously.
Mhm. And you're using the term ally. We would know that as an accountability partner.
Right. That's
Can
right.
you explain to us a little bit about that
Yeah, so
term?
we call it ally because accountability partner often has this taint to it. I'm going to hold you accountable is what we say in business or whatever, and it means that someone is going to I got you right, and now you're going to pay. And an ally is a little different. An ally has your back. They want to see you succeed. They know your goals. They want to come or they know your weaknesses. They know your strengths, and they're going to help you achieve your goals with kindness, with care, but with biblical instruction and support. And so that we call that an ally because again, an ally wants to see you succeed. They're not just out to play gotcha, but to say, okay, if there is a feeling, what happened? Let's talk about that, right?
Mm, nice.
The picture I had in my mind as you were saying that was an accountability partner might be waiting for you to mess up, kind of like that image of Zeus with his lightning bolt, where an ally is a man in the war with you on the field. He's
That's right.
got your back in battle, and he'll throw himself in front of a bus for you if that's what's necessary.
And what's interesting about the concept of covenant eyes and people using it, we have found that 96% of people who start using our software with and have an ally in place, 96% never score from day one above to explicit. We hear constantly people say, just knowing that someone else is seeing what I'm would appear on my screen, it gets rid of that online disinhibition effect, right? Where because it's secret, maybe I'll go places that I wouldn't go if you were sitting right next to me. And that's really what Covenant and I said. It allows someone to walk with you so you're not stuck alone and vulnerable. A lone sheep is a dead sheep.
Ooh,
That's
there's a quote.
There's a quote. Absolutely true. So, if I'm getting this correctly, your software, Covenant Eyes software, would allow a person to go anywhere they want, and and then wherever they went, wherever they visited on the internet, or even like you said, if they plug in a thumb drive, those images are going to be captured if they're flagged. It's not like, or is it that Covenant Eyes actually stops a person from
So we do
going?
both.
Okay.
You can choose. You can have accountability only, or you can have accountability and filtering. But regardless, we're going to show you what appears on what's appearing on the screen.
That's great. So tell us a little bit more in regard to this whole ally concept. Predominantly people who listen to this podcast are going to be betrayed wives for the most
Mhm.
part. And many of us get frustrated with our husband's accountability or with our husband's ally. And I think a lot of times a couple of things are happening. We want our husbands to choose who their ally is going to be. We want them to choose a great one. We also don't want to step into a role where we are trying to monitor and control his healing process. So, with that said, what qualities would a recovering person want to look for in a solid accountability partner? What do you recommend? Should there be more than one? How many should there be? What should people look for when it comes to accountability? Because we can have really great friends who don't know how to ask really great questions. So maybe kind of outline that for us. What should we look for?
Galatians 6 talks about you who are spiritually mature, gently restore, right? And then it continues on of don't grow tired of doing that. So that's a good descriptor right there of someone who is a good accountability partner, who is spiritually mature and doesn't grow weary of doing the job. Um,
That's hard to find, Sam.
it is hard to find. I often talk to pastors and they'll say, Sam, you say that we need to practice James 5:16, which was a foundational principle of the Christian faith, right? To confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. And I'll go to a small church and they'll say, Sam, we all know each other really well, so it's hard to be that kind of vulnerable. Our kids go to school together, or we've known each other a long time, etc. And then I'll go to a big, church or mega church, and they're like, you know, there's thousands of people that attend here, and I don't know someone well enough to be my ally. Can you help me figure that out? And it's not the size of the church that's the issue. It's not necessarily our relationships that are the issue. We need to ask ourselves, what part of James 5:16 do we not believe? To be able to confess my sin to someone else and be open and honest with someone else is that kind of vulnerability is often foreign in a me-centric culture, right? So it requires that I own it, and I choose someone who is spiritually mature, but also that I can man up. I'm going to just say that, man up enough to own my struggles. And I actually have a pastor who's a longtime friend, as well as some other guys over the years. But this one, we talk every Wednesday, and I've been at this for a long time. Every Wednesday morning at 7:30, he either calls me or I call him. We're having a text, we're doing something like that. But it's my responsibility. It's not his responsibility, even though he does that a lot, right? And so I own my own accountability. But going into that is first you already go, okay, how do I choose? And that's hard because so many men today don't have close relationships. Their closest relationships might be their spouse. And so they feel, well, I can talk to you about it, but I don't want to talk to somebody else about it. Well, that's just really, I want to say you guys need to have another guy in their life to be their ally. And they don't have to be a miracle worker. They don't have to understand everything there is to understand. In fact, Covenant Eyes and using the Victory app, again, free, it walks you through how can I be a better ally? What are some things that I should be asking? How do I be firm but not a wimp? How do I be kind and generous, but at the same time not weak and wimpy? Right? So you don't have to go on this alone. Using the Victory app, tap on that learning section. It's going to walk you through how do I find a good ally? How can I find someone I can trust? We also have a free ebook. Um, And it walks you, it's called Allied, Fighting Porn with Accountability, Faith, and Friends. And that's a free ebook. You can download it from our educational resources at covenanteyes.com. And it'll walk you through, okay, so I don't know all the answers here, there as I'm entering in this idea of being accountable to someone. Well, that's okay. You don't know what you don't know, but you can take incremental steps to exponential results.
I will grab that link from your website and put it in the show notes for our listeners. That's a great tool. Um, I I'm curious, as I was just talking with a woman yesterday who is new in betrayal. D-Day happened about 6 weeks ago for her, and her husband is doing the thing of, I don't want to join a group. I don't want to tell my stuff to people that don't know me. They're very protected and very funneled.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he's been wanting her to be his accountability partner because I
Mm-hmm.
think he's comfortable with her. She's a known safe person, but uh, that's not our role. Maybe you can talk a little bit about why the wife is not a good accountability person or a good ally. But beyond that, my question actually is,
Mm-hmm.
we hear about this, Jen and I do, over and over again, where the husband wants to keep this very close to the cuff. He wants to keep his cards close, whereas women run. Oh, you're an expert in this, or you've been through this before. I have no clue who you are, but can we have coffee? Can we just get in community? Can we talk about all the things? Is that a man versus woman thing? Is that a how we're made thing? Or is it an addiction shame thing versus a, I didn't sign up for this and I need help? Why does that happen with the struggling spouse so often?
Yeah, interesting. I don't think there would be any guy that would go, I'm hearing this knock in my engine and go, I need to keep that to myself. Right? They go talk to other guys. What do you know about that? I'd like to hear, you've been working on cars for a long time. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, my
And,
husband does that all the time. What's wrong with my golf swing? I'm going to
yeah,
find a
right.
pro that's going to help me fix that golf swing like he's on fire. Uh-huh.
Right. And so, but when it becomes something that makes us vulnerable, we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be open to something. We want to look good. It's our pride that's getting in the way. It's our, and you might say, well, we can be personal as women. I think there could be some differences. I'm not sure. I never thought of it that necessarily in that way because I find a lot of women are very scared about anyone in their church finding out about what's going on in their marriage. They've hid it as well. They keep it, the whole thing is a secret.
So true.
So there's I one of the ways that's so easy, and this is going to be an easy fix because you feel like I don't trust anybody in my church. I think they'll just wag their tongues about us behind our backs, or I'll be judged, or something like that. Samsonsociety.com. Uh, you can go there, click on a link. You get to attend a newcomer meeting. You get to understand what it's all about. And within there, you can join online. You don't have to meet with someone necessarily in person. You can have an online discussion group where you find an ally, what they call a Silas. A Silas is also, it follows the Apostle Paul. Silas walked with him. And so that close-knit community, that honesty, that confession can happen in a safe environment. So I think what really boils down to is shame and fear. And shame eats away at our self-worth and our value, and we're scared of anyone knowing not only our behaviors, but even the things that are causing them that we don't really fully understand yet. But when you really go into recovery, you have to dive deep, and that can feel scary in the church because we haven't seen that in the church very often, where we've practiced that kind of accountability and openness and vulnerability. So a place like Samson Society, which they do have in-person meetings, but you can do that online. And there's just a little bit of distance. I'm talking to someone I don't necessarily know, who's not going to be judging me, and I can just listen when I first show up. I can, and after a while, it becomes contagious that, oh, these guys are finding freedom. I want some of that.
Yeah, that is good information. Having grown up in the church, I think there's been, and I was raised in an image oriented family of origin.
Mm-hmm.
There is this Sunday best, squeaky clean, you show up on Sunday all together and you can't let anyone know. And that's historical too, with generations, faith
Sure.
based or not, that you don't air your dirty laundry. And I'm really glad there's a shift in that narrative happening. Has been for decades now, but it's becoming more and more prevalent. I was just listening to John Burke, the author of Imagine Heaven, on a new podcast I'm listening to, and he was talking about holding church in a bar, going to where the people were. And that kind of speaks to what you're sharing right now, Sam, is that we can show up messy and we should be able to be vulnerable and know that we're not going to be judged and rejected.
The crazy thing is, I come to a guy and I've talked about all the mess that I've had in my life and where I've been struggling, and I expect him to reject me and turn me away and push me away and tell me I'm not worthy. And instead, he says, "Man, that's hard. That's a real struggle. Man, I'll walk with you. I'm here for you." And suddenly the whole dynamic changes. Now I can make better choices. I'm empowered to do more. I can dive a little deeper, little by little, and address the struggle in my life that I felt so alone with. And now someone's believing in me to help and encourage me to help me grow. It's a game changer. And it's hard. Spouses can't do that for one another. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? There's a lot of performance that goes on with, and frankly, I've seen this with people who use Covenant Eyes. They will install Covenant Eyes, never talk to their accountability partner,
Mm-hmm.
never really dive any deeper. But man, they just grip knuckle tight, white knuckle tight. They're just going to hold on and fight through this, but they never find real healing. And real healing brings real freedom and real change. It's you know, People can quit their bad behaviors, but they're still a jerk. They can still be mean and ugly and have a temper and be mad and angry and blow up at things and etc. You name it. Or they stop self-soothing in one area and they start self-soothing in another area. And maybe I've dropped pornography, but now I've picked up alcohol or something else or food or whatever it is. And now I'm just exchanging one bad behavior for another to get a dopamine fix, to get a soothing that to regulate my emotions, to anesthetize my moods. And I'm not really finding real healing. Well, real healing only comes in community. So you can't do this alone. And that deeper community allows someone to, I know I jumped around there a little bit, but so why is it hard? Why is it hard for a spouse? Well, one, most men who have struggled with pornography typically have been struggling with pornography since childhood. Not just I got to adulthood, I suddenly saw an image and suddenly that I'd made a bad choice. It usually is early exposure, the ongoing use and repetition through adolescence, and some trauma or pain that's happened typically early in life but can happen elsewhere.
So
And
true.
until I deal with that pain, until I deal with those hurts, until I bring some healing into my life, the only way I've learned to anesthetize those emotions, regulate those moods, is with pornography or drugs or alcohol or food or whatever else it is. And And so when someone is struggling, a guy is struggling, he goes, "Oh man, I've got these incessant thoughts. I want to go toward pornography." Well, right then, that's a good time to call your accountability partner, and he says, "Well, what's going on? What are you feeling?" Because what you're feeling leads to what you're thinking, leads to what you're doing. And or if someone is or if he's already acted out, well, that's a perfect time to say, okay, let's pause for a minute and go back and look what happened before you acted out. What was going on during that day that was so impactful that maybe made you lean towards some self-soothing behavior? It's hard for a spouse to carry that burden. So you're feeling these thoughts of lust right now? I mean, come on, I thought we were over this yesterday. And or you acted out because your boss yelled at you. Big whoop. My boss,
Yeah.
there's a lack of understanding. There's a, it's a lot to carry. And I remember, this has been about 20 years or so ago. And my wife was looking over my shoulder. Uh, I was looking over my wife's shoulder at the Covenant report that was on in an email in her feed because I, like others, I'd said, "Oh, I get accountability. My wife can receive my report too." And it was just an openness. It wasn't say, "Hey, you be my ally," or and I said, "Hey, don't you ever open those reports?" And she goes, "No, that's what I got Brian for."
Yes.
And it was encouraging at the same time. It was both encouraging for both of us that she knew there was this guy named Brian that, and he's still my buddy today. And he still receives my reports to this day. And he's willing to step up and say, "Hey, Sam, what's going on?" And she knew that about him. And I think that's a key thing too.
Sam, tell me what you think about two people recovering from unwanted sexual behavior holding each other accountable. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a healthy scenario?
I think it's okay if they have someone else who's also with them that's farther down the road.
Okay.
The two people might say, "I'm struggling right now. Oh, I'm struggling too." But what you don't want to get in this situation, well, "Oh, we all struggle. Don't worry about it. It's okay. I struggled last week too." And then we just keep this sort of ongoing sort of confession going, but no real change is happening.
Thank
And
you.
repentance requires not only confession, but change. Now, the problem is neither one of those people know how to change. And so what they need is someone to guide them through a process toward real healing. And so it's okay if they want to say, "Hey, I want to encourage you today, man. I've been 30 days sober, or I've been 5 days sober," and whatever it is. And they're encouraging one another, and they're having conversations about what they're feeling and thinking, and that's that kind of thing. But that shouldn't be their only person. They need someone who's been a little farther down the road that can provide some support and guidance. That's why I sort of recommend things like Samson Society, going to a counselor, because they'll have groups where they have people on varying degrees of their healing journey. And, uh, it takes time to find this healing. God can
Yeah.
do anything. He often heals people of drugs and alcohol and tobacco and whatever else, porn too. But the vast majority of the time, he takes us on a journey, a childlike journey where I have to submit to someone else, where I have to lean in childlike faith on Christ's work in my life. And that journey doesn't happen overnight. We often call that sanctification in the church. And typically, for someone to find real recovery, 2 to 5 years, right?
Right.
And so the biggest difference is a lot of people in the 5 year area, 6 years or a little more, I find they don't have a guide that's walking along with them. They're not doing the study to understand why they feel so stuck. And those on the lower sphere are going, I'm dedicated to this. I'm going to understand why I struggle. I'm going to be open with others. And that's where the healing takes off. That's where you put on rocket engines. But as long as you're hiding, as long as you're him hawing around, as long as you're lying, you just extend your own recovery period. And that's the problem with two guys who are both stuck in early stages. They don't know where they're going. They're likely going to be lying to each other because they've been used to lying for a long time. And someone who's been on the road a little longer spots the lies. They the deceit, not just deceit about what I did, but we lie to ourselves about how well we're doing, how long it's been, all those kinds of things. And so, someone who's been farther down the road can say, "Hey, let's dig deeper into that."
That is so good. I remember, are you familiar with The Faster Scale by Michael Dye?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the first things in the very top there is under forgetting priorities is, have I lied to anyone? And Dan will say, oh, no, I haven't lied to anyone. I'm like, well, have you lied to yourself? Because I think that that's really where it begins. Have we lied to ourselves? The honest answer probably is yes. And then we kind of go from there. I'm wondering, you had mentioned talking to a pastor. We know that you wrote the book, The Healing Church, and you talk about where churches get it wrong about pornography, and you talk about how to fix it. A lot of times in the church is this sort of this spiritual bypass, and so yes, we can often go into a church scenario where you feel seen, where you feel heard, where you can exhale and start to address what is driving the behavior. And then on the other spectrum, sometimes we can go to a church scenario where it's like, yes, the Lord can heal you. Just pray more, try harder, that sort of thing. Can you tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book and maybe how it addresses some of that spiritual bypass?
Yeah. You know, my inspiration for writing this book actually started in 2000, well, probably before then, but really hit home in 2019. I'd been leading a group of speakers on a tour of homeschool conferences where we're helping to equip parents about how pornography is coming after their children. And the crazy thing about this was we would have these ballrooms packed with parents who brought their kids with them to hear me talk about pornography. And the reason they were bringing their kids is because they already knew their child had been exposed to pornography. So they wanted to understand the neurology, the habituation, all those kinds of things. I have an understanding of what should their next steps be. How should they protect their kids? But also, we know that our child has been exposed to pornography. How do we help them in their growing up years? Then I went to a men's ministry conference, and they had asked me to speak about the basics of pornography addiction. And so we did. We hit the basics. And I only had a 45-minute session. It was meant to be a Q&A kind of thing. And so I just covered the basics of that early exposure, the ongoing use and repetition, and some pain that we're using for self-soothing, right? We just got to the basics. And they were like, oh, I'd never thought of it in that way. And I thought, we are doing a disservice in our seminaries and our Christian educational systems for our ministry leaders because we don't equip them with tools to understand why people get stuck, why they often stay stuck without help, and what are meaningful steps that the church can take to lead people to lasting freedom. Not this ongoing maintenance of trying harder or praying a little more, etc., but really entering Christ's healing. And so that was the whole purpose of the book. I had a deep empathy for ministry leaders to help them understand this issue better and understand how it's it's impacting every ministry of the local church, from children's ministries to teen ministries to marriage and adult ministries to senior citizen ministries. It's undermining every one of the ministries in the local church. And if the church isn't addressing it, then they're sort of spinning their wheels. They're not gaining the traction that they really should be getting in all of their ministries. When we think 3/4 of men in the church, almost 40% of women in the church say you have an ongoing struggle with pornography, and yet only 10% of churches are providing any support,
Yeah.
then we're missing something. We're missing something that's a pandemic in the local church.
We are. That's a statistic that Jen and I used when we spoke to a group of pastors. What was it, Jen? A year and a half,
Last
2
year.
years
Yeah.
ago.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was so discouraging. I know that the book says 7% of churches have a program present. And now I think it's the new
Brand new study came
Varna.
out in
Yeah.
October.
Yep. And
Hmm.
they're saying now 10% of churches. How do
That's
we,
right.
this is not the question that I really want to ask you. This is just in the flow of conversation. How do we shift that? How do we get churches to have more? I know there's Celebrate Recovery, there's all kinds of different ministries. Pure Life Alliance has Set Free and Hidden Hurt for the women. And how do we get churches to implement programs, Sam?
Yeah. I think I kind of walk through this in the book, right? How do we begin addressing these kinds of things? And part of it is being missional about it. And that means a culture shift, because you can give permissional culture, and permission says, if you guys want to address that over there in your Bible study or whatever, that's okay. But if it never happened, we really wouldn't care, right? That's permissional. But missional says pornography is a serious impact to our church. We're going to address that. And whether our church is small or it's a large church, nonetheless, pornography is impacting our church. It's hidden, it's secret, nobody wants to talk about it. So, how can we begin having conversations that allow people to be open, honest? How can we create a safe place and a safe space, safe process for people to find healing? A safe place and a safe process for healing. And often, the easiest way to go about this sometimes is actually starting with our parents. That we want to provide some understanding about these myths that parents believe, that their child would never be curious like you were curious. They would, if they saw something, they'd come and tell you. Um, if they did see something, they'd just turn away. And we miss the neurological impact that has on a young child. So just educating parents to understand how pornography is so impactful on a young brain. Suddenly, the parents are the ones going, yeah, I was 8 years old when I first saw pornography. I remember, I can tell you a full story about that day, or I'll tell you a full story about that first seeing that pornography, even though I can't tell you anything else about that day. That's how impactful it is on the brain, on that a young child's brain. And now we're starting to have a conversation, right? Now we can make
Yes.
it part of our senior ministries or our teen ministries, our marriage ministries. We can begin peeling back the layers. And of course, we don't have time to talk about how we do all that, right? That's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, there we go. We need to have a sticker that says normalize vulnerability or
Yeah.
celebrate vulnerability.
Yeah.
And if you're a man listening to this podcast right now, maybe your wife sent this to you and said, listen to this. Jen and I have had this conversation so many times. We want you gentlemen to know that this is what your strength is for. Yes, your strength is to go out and battle the bad guys, protect the nation, all of those things. But there is a gentle strength. There is a sacrificial love that happens when you admit your weaknesses and you press in and you risk vulnerability. This is what this is what we crave, is men who will stand up. There's a strength in
Mhm.
admitting this is the battlefield that we have right now in our nation. It's addiction, it's hiding, it's the appearance. I mean, Sam, I'm sure you could say it much more eloquently than I am, but to admit your weaknesses and then find allies to help you grow is biblical, and it's sexy. And the security that we crave as women, this is how you do it. You get honest. You get in the trench and you do the hard work. This is the hard work that they talk about, right? Yeah. So Sam's just like, you blushed a little bit there.
I'm not going to tell any guys that they're sexy. I'm just leaving
You can leave that to the women. We'll do
Yeah.
that.
I'm just low
That's
key
funny.
proud of you, Chris.
Thanks, friend. You're good at that. Okay. So in the book, Jen and I were flipping through, I'm about halfway through your book. It's so good. But in one of your chapters features Dr. Sheri Keffer. And it's pretty unusual, Sam, especially for a former journalist such as yourself, to ask someone else to write a specific chapter. What was your reason for this? Why did you bring in Dr. Sheri Keffer?
I've gotten to know Sheri for a number of years, and Dr. Sheri, man, she is just compassionate, caring, vulnerable. Uh, she's a professional Christian counselor who's been doing this work, but she walked her own road. Um, it's a difficult road, and she has stepped through that. And as a speaker, radio host, author, she is just among the very best in her field. And so I called her up and I was like, listen, Dr. Sheri, I want to set these pastors and ministry leaders up for success. And I'm doing this chapter like the before this on this, but would you really unveil for ministry leaders how this impacts the physical, spiritual, psychological, all the different aspects of a person and mind, body, and spirit, how this betrayal impacts women? And so she graciously agreed, and she has been a champion for the book, for ministry leaders. She speaks. She spoke at the American Association of Christian Counselors Conference, and I said, hey, if you're going there to speak and you've got hundreds of, she might have 1,000 people in that ballroom, I'll give a copy of the book to every ministry leader that's there.
Nice.
And so, oh my goodness, it was fantastic. And then we've gotten many other opportunities to spread the word, and she's just a champion. And she wrote a wonderful book. It's a beautiful book called Intimate Deception: Healing the Wounds of Sexual Betrayal.
Yes, such a good book.
If you haven't read that yet, please get that. It's Intimate Deception: Healing the Wounds of Sexual Betrayal.
Love that. In setting up the chapter that was written by Dr. Keffer, you wrote a chapter called Wrong Answer, Try Again. But I have to just bring notice to chapter 17 in your book, Culture Eats Strategy for Lunch. Now, I really want to hear Wrong Answer, Try Again, but I'm curious, which one do you like more of these two chapters? Now, no, I mean, I know I'm not asking you to choose.
It's like asking a parent to choose their favorite child.
Right?
Well, you know what? Do what you're told, Chris. So I really like the two. The two strike me quite a bit, and I know they're different, very, very different chapters. But Wrong Answer, Try Again. Could you touch on that and just briefly touch on A Culture Eats Strategy for Lunch? Because I just think that's a brilliant title. Let's be honest.
It's very curious.
I am so
yeah.
curious.
This is hard. This is indeed like choosing children. I wrote Culture Eats Strategy for Lunch to help ministry leaders understand that it's imperative that we address the culture, because you can try to implement programs or do stuff, but if you don't address the underlying culture of your church, then there's a lot of things you won't really be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And among those is address pornography. But there'd be a lot of other things. There in general, there'll be a lot of hiding and other stuff that happens. And so that's a very important, valuable chapter. I will have to say that if I've got to choose between my children, I'm going to say Wrong Answer, Try Again. A couple of reasons. One, in the history of my own churches that I attended, I remember a friend, some friends, they were married, they're now divorced, but they had gone to our pastor, not my current pastor, but some years back, and they're struggling in their marriage and they want help. And the answer, both from the pastor and the pastor's wife, was, let's talk about your sex life.
Ooh.
And if the concern was that everything just boils down to the sexual relationship. And if you get that right, then everything else would sort of work itself out. And unfortunately, we were seeing the same thing over and over again in the church when it comes to addressing pornography. And so I find that stories are a key way to help build empathy and understanding. It's one thing to say something is true, but it's more memorable and impactful to tell a story of truth. So in the book, I used real people stories to help ministry leaders understand what are some poor practices, why are we often blaming sex, and for his struggle with porn. And so a lot of pastors just don't understand the nature of addiction, and more sex isn't the answer. It's just like saying to a wife whose husband has a problem with alcohol, just give him more alcohol. So and as I said, I interviewed more than 70 pastors and ministry leaders and counselors, and I was meeting with some counselors from Focus on the Family, and they were just telling one story after another after another. It was this little roundtable discussion, uh, and one described that a pastor went to, or that a wife went to her pastor and said, my husband's been struggling with pornography. We know he needs help. How can you help support us? And he listened. He asked, well, how long has this been going on? And she felt like he was really listening to me. He's going to reach out to him. And then the next day, the pastor's wife called and said, hey, do you mind if I stop over and visit? And she said, sure, okay. But now she's wondering, wait, did my pastor just tell the pastor's wife what's been going on in my marriage? Did I talk to him about my husband's porn use? And then when she shows up, the assistant pastor's wife is with her too. So wait, does now the assistant pastor's wife know, and the assistant pastor, and who else knows? And so they come into her home and they each have a box for her. And inside is lingerie.
Oh, I knew it. I knew that was coming.
Right? And so she gets it. It's her fault.
Wow.
She's to blame. If she just did more, performed better, whatever it is, then maybe he wouldn't struggle with pornography. And so there's repeated stories in that chapter that help us empathize just a little more to understand, because we can tell facts, but if we don't hear the story behind the facts, then we miss the example that we can learn from it.
Yeah. And Chris, this is something you've heard many a time and have experienced yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, that was my story as well. Our wonderful family therapist, he's wonderful, but not trained in sex addiction or betrayal trauma. And so on D-Day, got an appointment that night, emergency appointment. And after hearing our story, said, okay, I need you guys to have a date night. You're going to go to Victoria's Secret. You're going to shop for some lingerie together. And because what we need to create novelty in the marriage. Didn't ask, how's your sex life? How's your intimacy? It was fantastic. It was great. It was active, fun, connected, all of that. So there was just a lack of understanding. And that's one of the things that I know the three of us emphasize when we're talking with struggling spouses and betrayed spouses is go to find a therapist that is specifically trained in betrayal trauma and sex addiction, because it is a niche area. And our general therapists and our general coaches and our general pastoral or lay counselors cannot adequately address this area, because that's what we think is, what is the other person doing or not doing, what's missing in the relationship. And again, sex addiction is not a sex problem. It's the drug of choice to get that dopamine hit that you referred to earlier in the podcast, Sam, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
And so when we have surface understandings, we give surface solutions.
Yeah. That was definitely a mic drop right there. Yeah. When we have surface understanding, we give surface solutions, and they create secondary trauma. Oof,
They do. They cause lasting pain. And now we've heaped on, where there has been this other pain, now we're heaping on spiritual abuse. And of course, no ministry leader wants to heap on spiritual abuse on top of this. So that's why I wrote the book, to help them have a deeper understanding. We have a bias here, right, in the church. And the bias comes from first of all, this is where I'm going to throw myself under the bus, and there might be some leaders who want to tune out. And I just stick with me for just a minute. Stick with me if you're listening. The vast majority of those in pastoral leadership are men, right? Just fact. That's proven by statistics. The vast majority of men's relationships where they talk and commune are with other men, right? Besides my wife, the most of my guys are the ones I talk to, and I get their male perspective. Next, in general, men have a greater desire for sex. That's not a blanket statement. It changes by individual, but overall, scientifically, in general, men have a greater desire for sex. And they've likely experienced a time when they had desired sex, but she was unavailable, wasn't in the mood, something had happened, whatever it was, he feels some sort of rejection. And so ministry leaders have experienced that themselves, right? Whether they've ever experienced a struggle with pornography or not. And that's clouded their judgment and has led to a false equation that sex is the answer to most marriage issues, including pornography. But sex doesn't satiate. Instead, the porn struggler has sex and then he uses porn too.
Yes.
Blaming it on the sexual relationship also misdirects the responsibility for the sin from the sinner. And then it creates this justification. I feel justified in using porn because there was this time of rejection or whatever it is. It fails to direct the one who is sinning to seek healing, to accept discipline, to learn self-control. And so that's why we see most sex addiction counselors, most intensive, actually talk about a period of abstinence, which scares the living daylights out of him because can I live without sex? I don't know if I can. In fact, I've been using pornography since I was a child or an adolescent, and I don't know if I can make it mentally
It's
without.
literally a detox period for them, correct?
It's literally retraining their brain. The first 14 days actually resets that neurochemistry. So only 14 days? Why would most counselors recommend between 60 and 90 days? Well, it takes at least 45, 30 days just to begin gaining enough confidence to say, I think this is possible. And then it takes 90 days to really, though, to begin learning what real intimacy is. And it's not boiled down to sex because he has equated that if I'm loved, then it's sex versus I am loved and cared for and needed, and I'm a champion and I'm a hero in my home, and I've been these other ways of connecting on a walk or in conversation or in many other ways that I personally didn't struggle with. So, I've walked my own road on this, right? And so that 90 days resets and creates a better community and connection in your home in so many aspects. It resets your spiritual and mind, body, spirit healing is required. And so that 90-day journey, especially that first 90 days, is a tough haul, but it is so worth it.
So worth it.
Well, you have to detach. I'm going to say, I'll get spicy. No one's surprised by the fact that Jen's going to get spicy. But when we have an orgasm, that is what we connect to. There's oxytocin that's flowing. So if someone is orgasming to pornographic images, we have to detox from those images. We have to detach from that dopamine and the oxytocin that flows through our body in those moments to attach to something else. You have to detach from it to attach to something else. And that's just the science behind it. And then we could throw in a bunch of all other spiritual components to that as well. But that's just the science behind it. You've got to detox from one thing to attach to another.
Sam, as we wrap this wonderful, only scratching the surface conversation up, I wanted to ask you, what would you say to the wife who hopes and prays that accountability software will be the cure or safety net that she desperately needs? They're looking for safety. They're looking for security. They tend toward hypervigilance, policing, or they just go into it. This is your problem. You handle it. I don't want to know about it. Let's carry on. And they kind of stick their heads in the sand. But Jen and I deal as coaches with the women who are trying to fix this. They're trying to work towards healing, and they desperately want that security. And they tend to find that by snooping or being hypervigilant or policing their spouses. So I know that I was hoping that accountability software would provide that safety and security I needed. And so, what would you say to that? And also, do you have a final word of encouragement or hope that you could offer our listeners as we close?
Accountability software is a tool. It is not the answer. The answer is really digging deeper with someone else, with others, learning and growing. And so you can never force accountability onto someone else. So it has to be a desire to want to change.
Mm-hmm.
There can be no accountability without vulnerability, and there can be no vulnerability without safety. And so he needs to feel safe. You need to feel safe. And that means bringing others into the sphere. So monitoring is a means to be honest and open with someone else. But it's only part of being open with someone else. There is a porn store 3 miles from my house. I know where it's at, know how to get there. I can go there anytime. I work from home. No one will ever know. But what do I want?
Mm.
Who's the man I want to be? And that's where accountability software is a support, where the Victory app by Covenant Eyes, with all of its education about how did I get here? Why do I seem to stay stuck? How can I make meaningful change? What are these incremental steps that I can take? Because if I'm just going to white knuckle it, or if I'm just going to someone else forcing me to do this and I don't desire it for myself, then there's no wall tall enough that won't keep me from going after the pornography.
Behavior modification does not work.
It does not work. And so Covenant Eyes is a beautiful tool that has helped millions of people. I think we're up to about 2 million people.
Congrats.
Wow.
That has helped people in their journey toward freedom. And it's our mission and passion to create, software and educational content to help people stop pornography for good and live in that wholeness and freedom. But you've got to be willing to go on a personal level on a journey with openness, with curiosity, with understanding, with a willingness to say, I don't care what it takes. I have a goal to live in Christ's freedom. That's what I want. I want to live in ongoing integrity. And when you define that, when you create this eureka moment, and there's a whole, I hope that your listeners will get a copy of The Healing Church, What Churches Get Wrong About Pornography and How to Fix It, because it walks through many people's stories of how they created that moment in time where said, I'm not only done, I'm tired of keeping this a secret, and I'm going to work with others toward lasting healing.
Yes.
And when you and so that's the key. You can try resolutions, you can try software, you can try filtering. That's one of the things we found hugely was uh, back early on in our history, we provided you could use filtering or accountability and filtering. And what we found was people who are only using filtering were beating it up to find a way to get around it because it was all in secrecy, right? And so when we get rid of the secrecy, then we can find true healing.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as we live in the dark, our minds will be swamped in the dark.
Yeah. I was talking with a gentleman a couple weeks ago, and I said, "What did it for you? What affected that change for transformation after decades of pornography use?" And he said, "I didn't want to be that guy anymore. I
Yeah.
didn't want to be that guy." It does. It has to come from the inside, and we always say, "Pursue your own healing." We've got to pursue our own healing as individuals. No one can fix it for us, and no one can will it for us. We have to want it for ourselves. That's what I hear you saying, is that it's that drive, it's that conviction, and that willingness to get vulnerable and authentic and get real. That's what's going to do it. Yes?
In one of the chapters, I go deep in talking about accountable relationships. And among the most important things is you own it.
Mm.
You don't leave it to someone else to call you. You call them. I've run through many experiences where I hear people say, well, my accountability partner didn't call me, so I just let that slide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so whenever I am coaching someone, whenever I say, listen, it's your responsibility to check in with me. We're going to meet, but it's always your responsibility to check in with me, not me to dive in and try to ask the right question or uncover the right layer. It's how much do you want your freedom?
Yes, you got to do the work. The analogy or the phrase that you just said made me think of the person who is determined to lose 40 pounds, but there's still a gallon of ice cream in the fridge, so I'm just going to finish that off first. Or
Right.
well, it's Christmas, so I'm going to eat a
One
whole
more time isn't going to hurt.
right one more time, and there's always that one more time or that one more time or that it's a special circumstance. How much do you want it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be hard. It's going to be weird because you've never done it before. Your brain, Jen's always telling me, the brain wants what it knows. The brain wants
Mm-hmm.
familiarity. It's going to be uncharted territory, but you got to be Magellan. You got to be Lewis and
If you're
Clark.
not uncomfortable, I don't know that you're doing it right. You know,
I love that.
That's
like
actually, I'm going to write that down, Jen.
the
That's going to
second,
be my
the
next
second I
sticker
hear
I
Dan
make.
say, the second I hear my husband say something like, "Yeah, I'm feeling just so much better," I'm like, "Oh, red flag." Not that I want him feeling worse, not that I want him to be living in shame, but this should be challenging for any of us in any area that we want to grow. If it's not challenging, I have to question whether or not we're growing.
Challenging at the same time, so rewarding
Yes.
as you take one step at a time. And you should be celebrating those every step along the way. And
Absolutely.
but suddenly you wake up and go, I don't want that anymore. What is that? Man, that feels really good. I think one of the things I hated when my wife and I were first married, we weren't Christians, we weren't going to church, etc. She didn't know anything about the gospel. And porn wasn't hidden, it was just sitting on my workbench. And she had the wisdom in that early time to go, I I don't see this as art or sort of entertainment. I think you just want to have sex with these women. And I really didn't have an argument against that. And I says, well, I love you. I don't love this. And I'll throw it all away. So I did. I threw it all away. And then my brain went on fire. And I was so angry with myself. Why because most people who struggle with pornography are control freaks anyway. So I was there and I wanted to be in control. Why am I not control? And I'm among the luckiest people you'll ever meet when my wife starts attending this small little church in the community we live in now, still. And she says, hey, they're doing this marriage count thing class, and I'd really love for us to go to that together. Would you go with me onto that? And so I agreed, and they were nuts. They were most peculiar people. The facilitators of that class were 12-steppers. I didn't know that at the time, but they closed the door and they looked back at the class with a big smile and they said, this is a safe place. What is said here stays here. And in that environment, people talked about the horrible things they said to their spouse and did and things they thought and all this. And in that environment, I also discovered that's where pornography could be compulsive and addictive. And that was a great relief because that meant evolution didn't make me this way and God didn't make me this way. And I didn't have to stay this way. And with that kind of compassion in a local church, that's right, a local, little small, 150 person church, you can practice this in your church too, to have that kind of compassion and gospel and Christ healing in your little small town church or your big church. It doesn't matter
I
what size the church is.
Yeah.
I wish our listeners could see your face right now. I wish they could see the giant smile on your face, and it's choking me up a little bit because I 100% believe everything you're saying. There is light coming from you as you testify to the profound experience you had through the healing power of Jesus Christ and his people and his church. Um, every woman longs to see that kind of smile on her husband's face as he testifies to the healing power of Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. And so, oof. Okay, I just had my moment. Chris, you and I are switching roles today. I'm all teary and you're all spicy. What in the world is happening on around here, you know?
We're growing. We're growing in our opposite areas. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
beautiful. And yeah, your face is beaming. There's so much light and joy and encouragement. And I too wish that the women could see your face, because this is the encouragement that we need as
Yeah.
wives, is
Yeah.
that this is possible. And one of our favorite quotes here on this podcast is Anne Vascomp. Shame dies when stories are shared in safe places. And Satan hates that. So if you really want to piss off the enemy today, put on your Ephesians 6 armor and go to your church, however big or small it is, and shut that door and share all the ugly. Get it out there. Get vulnerable. And ladies, if you're looking for a formula, men too, Sam touched on it. See it, own it, fix it. That's the formula. And it's the owning it part. Seeing it is hard too, but it's the owning it part that's the money, right? That's the part that we've really got to do. When we own it, then that's where God says, okay, there you are. Now you're not playing games anymore, and I can work with that. A broken and contrite heart, oh God, you will not despise, David said. And boy, wouldn't David know that. So Sam, thank you so much for this rich conversation. I know I can speak for Jen too when I say we hope you'll come back, and you are welcome anytime.
What is your wife's name? Because we want her on the podcast.
Oh, that's a great idea.
You mentioned her. I'm like, she sounds wonderful.
She is wonderful. Yeah,
You don't have to
she's a
say her name on
wonderful
the
person.
podcast.
Awesome. I would also like to say I can't imagine a world where Sam Black isn't a Christian. I can't imagine you as a non-Christian at all. Because pre-roll, we were talking about how, gosh, if you imagine the fruits of the spirit as various trees, there's an apple tree, there's a lime tree, there's a joy tree, a peace tree, a love tree. You are the kindness tree. You
Yeah,
just,
that's only the gospel.
amen, brother.
Selfish, self-centered, fearful, uh, shamed.
That was you before your Pilgrim's Progress
That was
journey.
before. So there is no.
Let me see him.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where
Praise God.
the Jesus Christ comes and makes all things new.
Testify.
One step at a
Yes.
time.
Yep.
Over time.
Yes. And we just can't do better than that. So on that note, let's wrap this up. Listeners, thank you for joining us on this amazing episode of The Betrayal. I'm not crying, you're crying. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Betrayal Recovery Transformation Podcast. We hope and pray that you found today's discussion as encouraging and insightful and empowering as Jen and I both have. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Also, please go check out Covenant Eyes and all of the fabulous resources that they have available for you on your healing journey. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your healing and transformation. And until next time, be kind to yourself and keep moving forward. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for joining us on the Betrayal Recovery Transformation Podcast. We hope you found today's discussion helpful and empowering. For more information, please be sure to check the show notes. Until next time, be kind to yourself and keep pursuing healing. A ministry supported by Pure Life Alliance.